Usha, welcome back to Make Sierra Leone Famous. Conversations that explore history, culture, and our identity. With me, your host, Vicky Remoe. You can find previous episodes of our show on www.vickyremoe.com. That's www.vickyremoe.com. And now, make the show begin.
One of the myths surrounding the Civil War is the first invasion of Bomaru, for instance. Whenever I tell people that that first invasion of Bomaru was not led by Fode Sanko, there's a problem because they've all grown to believe that that invasion on March 23rd, 1991 was Sanko's invasion of Sierra Leone, but that was not the situation. That invasion was a criminal attack between Sierra Leone army and an MPFL official on the Liberian side who sent a vehicle to be sold in Sierra Leone, a loaded vehicle. And Major Emmanuel Fode of Sierra Leone seized the vehicle and refused to pay. And the commander, MPFL commander Mekunagbe, even called on the local chiefs to intervene. And when they failed to succeed to solve the problem, he had to invade to retrieve his vehicle. That was the first attack.
Today, I'm talking to Joseph Ben-Kaifala. For more than a decade, has been trying to document and record Sierra Leone's war stories, stories of survival. And most recently, he was able to get a grant that's allowed him to start work traveling across the country, documenting sites and locations that mark really important events and stories about the 10-year Civil War. Now, if you don't know about Sierra Leone Civil War, it lasted for about 10 years. But the years before and the years after were probably, for a lot of people, still living with that immediate post-war trauma issues, instability, family fractions, separations, et cetera, et cetera. So, Joseph, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So, Joseph, one of the things that I've always wondered was what happened to you? Was there something in your own personal life, something that you experienced during the war that made you feel or believe that it was really, really important that we never forget?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I grew up in the Sierra Leonean and Liberian Civil War. So my own experiences sort of support the work that I do. And secondly, I am a historian. And as a historian, I believe that history should guide us into the future. And of course, in this country, we believe that if you don't know Usai de go, at least know Usai Komot. And I believe that as a historian, primarily it's my duty to help guide Sierra Leoneans with facts, because there are a lot of myths surrounding the Sierra Leonean Civil War. Everybody thinks they know what went wrong, right. But most people are basically spreading false information based on legends.
So I'm going to stop you there, Dora. Were you a historian already during the war?
I was in Liberia when the Liberian Civil War started, where I was sent to prison as a child because I was a Sierra Leonean. Because during that time, ECOMOG decided to intervene in Liberia against Charles Taylor, and Charles Taylor decided to arrest and incarcerate all ECOWAS citizens living in Liberia at the time. So I was arrested and incarcerated with my father. It was during my time in prison that I heard that the RUF was preparing to invade Sierra Leone. In fact, my father was very much involved in trying to send reconnaissance information to the president at the time to say that there are preparations to invade the country. We were eventually released, and then my father and I returned to Sierra Leone, and just a few weeks later, Bomaru was invaded by Fode Sanko.
How old were you at the time?
I was about 9 years old at the time.
So at the age of 9, you were put in jail during the Liberian Civil War.
Yes, I was put in jail for, I don't know exactly how long we were there, but definitely close to a year, because Sierra Leone was part of the ECOMOG force that invaded Liberia.
Okay. Yeah, my brain just kind of shut down because I'm thinking about a 9-year-old child in prison, and what that must do to someone's childhood. And yeah, it's surreal. It's not something that we expect to happen in the life of a child. So basically, from very early on, your life was so touched by civil conflict and civil strife and political instability. What happened after you and your father came to Sierra Leone?
Right. For a matter of fact, I think I found myself being actually lucky, because if you compare my life as a child prisoner to the children who were recruited to fight as combatants, I often say, in the scheme of things, I was a lucky child.
Do you think you tell yourself as a coping mechanism? I mean,
because I also witnessed the amount of suffering that children who were engaged in war as combatants went through. I'm grateful that I did not have to go through that kind of suffering, because you become a victim and a victimizer. And that is a very complicated situation to be in as a child, as young as 6, 7 year old. But then we left Liberia, we came back to Sierra Leone, of course, knowing that Sierra Leone would be invaded. I often say that we were leaving hell to go back to another hell, but there was no way around it. When we got to Sierra Leone, of course, in fact, there were some Sierra Leoneans at the time who believed that my father was part of the RUF, and we were the ones who had brought the war to Sierra Leone.
Okay, so you're back in Sierra Leone, and basically the war follows your footprints, right? And you're back at home, and you sound Liberian, right? And there's all this increased suspicion, because I remember very, very early on, my earliest memories of the war, actually, when I think back as an adult, what I remember was that 1990-91 period. It almost is like we, in Freetown at least, as a child in 1991, how old was I? I was born, I think I was maybe 6, about to be 7. And what I remembered mostly was, I don't want to say it was anti-Liberian sentiment, but there was definitely this whatever is happening now, when you would hear about, oh, there's a war. First of all, the war was this very distant thing if you were in Freetown. It was not even like it was happening in the same country, right? Was a very, as a child, that's what I remember, that just, it was a very, very, something that was very, very far away, distant, and it was the Liberians that had caused us this problem.
Right.
And that it was because we had allowed them to come and seek refuge in Sierra Leone. That's why now we were having this problem. That, if you asked me what I remember, my earliest memories, that's what I remember. And I remember my mom had taken in a woman who had they had walked from Liberia to Freetown. They had walked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the time. The lady had a child, and both of their feet were so swollen. By the time they arrived, they basically could not stand. And that's what I remember, those early days, but definitely not we as Sierra Leoneans had any problems or that this war was us at all. It was something that people brought. So in the minds of people, you were the ones who had brought it, right? Exactly. Do you find in your work, as you come across people, that there is a lot of blame and finger pointing around the war in general about causes?
Yes, in fact, that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. When you read the testimonies that the TRC collected from Kailahun districts,
And TRC, you mean the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, correct?
And
okay.
that is exactly what you see, because in fact, when Foday Sankoh initially invaded Sierra Leone, he had very little Sierra Leoneans with him. He had forces from the National Patriotic Front of Liberia. And so what you described was actually deliberate by the forces involved. Charles Taylor, who was leader of the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, had promised that he would make sure that Sierra Leone tastes the bitterness of war. So, of course, when Sierra Leone was invaded, most people who heard him on BBC assumed, well, then now he's fulfilling what he had promised. Then, right. Secondly, the power that was in Freetown, Joseph Momo, wanted Sierra Leoneans to believe that this was a mere criminal activity from Liberia. He just sort of looked at it as something he could deal with easily and people shouldn't have to worry. And also there was a developing legend around the Liberian Civil War. You know, they were killing people, eating their hearts, and slaughtering human beings. There was
that they were cannibals. I remember that as well.
Recording of the torturing and mutilation of Samuel Canyon Doe. And
yes, that we all saw as kids. Yeah, I remember that vividly.
So when we came back from Liberia, all of that surrounded people's reaction to our presence. And when you describe the mother and her child who came back from Liberia, that could have been me, because I walked back from Liberia with my father as a child, because there were no transportations at the time. The rebels had commandeered all forms of transportation in Liberia.
The minute that, you talk about that video about Samuel Kado, which I watch as it's being sold on the street, as you talk about that and this association between foreigners, Liberian cannibalism, I'm my mind specifically goes to the Gola Forest, where I interviewed someone who said that, when the Manis invaded Sierra Leone, they had these groups of warriors who were called the Sumbas, and how people were afraid of them because they thought that they were cannibals. And immediately I'm just like, if this is a place that 400 years ago believed that there are warriors who are cannibals, and you fast forward to early 90s and they're watching videos of people being mutilated, and it's so easy to see how the connections, do you know what I mean? It just feels so real, you know what I mean?
I think some of our stories are also based on what you mentioned earlier, coping mechanism. Sierra Leoneans are very afraid of confrontation, especially confronting things that might cause them pain. So we sugarcoat them with language that can help us cope with the situation. And I think that's what has surrounded the facts about the Civil War. There's one story when you ask every Sierra Leonean who survived the Civil War, a rebel, a combatant, they will say, well, one time, me commander, then they arrest this woman, a Bella woman, and then the bed say the other one's in a boy picking, the other one's in a girl picking.
Yes, I've heard that.
Not many people witness that, but it has become part of
everybody's story.
Experience that happens.
Yeah.
Exactly. Every combatant, every child combatant tells that story. And these are some of the things that we are trying to straighten out, to present the facts, so that we don't let our country descend into a situation in which this experience of the Civil War itself becomes individual experiences. One of the myths surrounding the Civil War is the first invasion of Bomaru, for instance. Whenever I tell people that first invasion of Bomaru was not led by Foday Sankoh, there's a problem, because they've all grown to believe that invasion on March 23rd, 1991 was Sankoh's invasion of Sierra Leone, but that was not the situation. That invasion was a criminal attack between Sierra Leone army and
the soldiers, right?
Yeah, and an MPFL official on the Liberian side who sent a vehicle to be sold in Sierra Leone, a loaded vehicle. And Major Emmanuel Foday of Sierra Leone seized the vehicle and refused to pay. And the commander, MPFL commander Mekunagbe, even called on the local chiefs to intervene. And when they failed to succeed to solve the problem, he had to invade to retrieve his vehicle. That was the first attack. After that attack was when Charles Taylor told Foday Sankoh that this is an opportunity. Now we know this country is weak. And that is why they couldn't wait for Food Sanko to even recruit enough Sierra Leoneans. They had to borrow MPFL forces to immediately invade Sierra Leone. But people cannot distinguish that fact. And whenever you tell them, of course, they become very defensive because we have grown to believe that on marches.
The talk not done yet, but make we take small music break with the musical sounds of Sierra Leone. That was the sound of Collins Brian Adeprat, aka The Champ, with We Lekwi Salon. Collins has been in the music industry for over 4 decades. In 2019, he was honored for his services to music in the West African community in South London. A self-taught musician, he was only 16 when he was appointed as assistant organist at Freetown's Buxton Memorial Methodist Church in Sierra Leone. Collins produced, arranged, and recorded the hit song We Lekwi Salon with Bonnie Mac and King Masco. And now, make we go back to make Sierra Leone famous.
You're challenging, it's like you're challenging the collective memory, right? You're challenging because people neatly pack their memories in ways to kind of justify past and current behavior and beliefs, right? So if I've developed all this anger and hatred, et cetera, for a group of people or for a person or an event, right? And I've mustered all of this, I don't put up me vex now one side, right? They can't tell me, say, this not to be that, now this, no, I don't, come on.
I often tell people that when you've done all this research and you've written a clear article and somebody comes to you and say, if my memory can serve me correctly, I say, no. Your memory is not serving you. And that is what we have to work against. And when it comes to cannibalism and all the mythical forces. I often say the Sierra Leonean Civil War ended up becoming competing war between mythical powers. And that's because the Sierra Leoneans realized and they believed that the RUF, the NPFL forces were protected by supernatural juju.
Absolutely.
And in order to fight them, you have to obtain your own juju. And that is exactly what started the Tamaboro, which was the first civil defense force, not the Kamajo. The first civil defense force in this country was the Tamaboro of Konyadugu. And that's another thing you have to clear because people believe, oh, the Kamajo, when they think of.
But as you're saying this, because some of the research that I've done, again, going back to the Mani invasion, there were groups of people in the north who were, I don't remember if it was the Lokos or it probably was the Limbas and the Korankos, that they lived in caves that when the Manis tried to invade their territories, they burnt down their own communities and had these old cave hidden things and they couldn't be conquered basically. So I can totally believe northerners, even when you go to Koinadugu now, there is a fear, I don't play with Koranko people. Those people are Korankos, Yalukas, and Yalukas, I fear them.
Civil defense, for instance, has always been part of this country. And yes, from the Mani invasion, the Sumba, which is really a Madingu war Suba, which is cannibal, has always been part of the psyche. But civil defense force itself was part of the traditional societies of this country. The Kamajos are hunters, and people again believe that the first time the Kamajos were deployed in this country was during the Civil War, but no. One of the major times that the Kamajos were deployed in this country.
All right, in your research, you said it was during the Hot Tax War, correct?
The Hot Tax War, and
I remember.
They were a major force against the colony of Freetown and its governors and leaders. So these are the things that we are trying to make sure people understand, to keep the facts. And these facts already exist in the TRLC reports.
And when you say we, you mean the Center for Memory and Reparations?
The Center for Memory and Reparations. And,
right. Can you tell me just a little bit more about, because I feel while the way that I found out about your work actually was, I think maybe a year or two ago, I just saw a Twitter thing that was just a tweet that went out on the day of the start of the war, or maybe it was January 6, 1999, you were doing a tweet to just recognize the day. And I remember thinking, no, that's so necessary. And, I think that's how I started following you, because I was just this is such important work. But I can guarantee you that the majority of Sierra Leoneans, both at home and in the diaspora, have never heard of the Memory Project and the Center for Memory and Reparations. So could you please tell us, just for the benefit of those who do not know, unlike myself who does know, why not just why is this important, but how are you going about doing this work within, the center is just basically the tool that you're using, right? How is that happening? What resources do you need to do this work? And how far along are you on your journey to achieving your goals of, preserving this memory so that we don't repeat the same mistakes again?
So here's a story. So of course, I told you earlier that I lived through the Sierra Leonean and Liberian Civil War, and I'm a historian. And those are some of the reasons why I'm doing this work. But the immediate trigger really was many years ago. I came back for holiday from Norway. And I was walking down Siaka Stevens streets in front of the courthouse, and there were many war victims there begging.
Okay, the amputees or internally displaced people?
And war wounded, some rape victims, and ordinary.
What year was this?
This was sometimes in 2004 or so.
Okay.
And ordinary Sierra Leoneans were so irritated by their presence to the extent that they would insult them. And, I'm thinking they are beggars. If you don't have anything to give, if only you knew that these people are bearing the brunt of our errors, of our failures, of our civil war, you wouldn't be making this a joke. So that is how the memory project started. I started speaking to these people, recording their stories, so I can bring it to the radio so ordinary Sierra Leoneans can. Our civil war wasn't so long ago. The victims are alive. Even in my work, I tell those who work with me that your mistake could be an insult to people who are victims who are still alive. So you have to be careful with the work. It's a very delicate work that we do.
Absolutely.
So now, one thing we've decided to do was to celebrate what we call, or memorialize what we call a year of remembrance. So between now and March 23rd, 2021, to make sure that we use every avenue within our means to bring information about the Civil War to Sierra Leoneans, and to ensure that the mass graves that are around this country are identified and remarked. And unfortunately, some of these mass graves are now used as dustbins, and some people have even built houses in some of these locations. And that is what we are trying to prevent by making sure that we identify and mark these graves and conduct traditional rites that can make people in those villages understand that these are places they should protect and take care of, and to bring that information to the nation so that all Sierra Leoneans can know the location of these mass graves and to help protect them. And to keep the memory of the Civil War in our society, because we are right. We grow up on this phrase: if you don't know Usai Dego, no Usai Komot.
Right. Do you think that, and this not something where, for me personally, over the years, the TRC in Sierra Leone was borrowed, right?
Yes.
TRC, they created the TRC after the TRC that was developed in post-apartheid South Africa. And they thought that this would be a really good model as part of Sierra Leone's post-war kind of recovery. But sometimes I feel like, and this is just a personal feeling, and I just want to hear what you think as a historian. I almost feel like we fast forwarded the TRC almost kind of like prematurely or unnaturally fast forwarded our individual or collective healing, recovery, as though by its existence and the work that they did is like the beginning and the end, that's the sum of it, right? That people get to come and say, oh, you did this to me, and okay, you say it, and then I accept, and then I forgive you, or somebody goes for war crimes, et cetera, et cetera. But I generally feel that there hasn't been, like, our memory of the war isn't solemn. There isn't a national effort, and there hasn't been by any government to really honor the victims, both those who served in military capacity and the innocent. There hasn't been enough done to just not to work against like trivializing the war victims, war wounded, like everything that's we've really dishonored the war and the memory of the war. When you compare it to, example, Rwanda, where last year I got the opportunity to go there for the 25th anniversary of, they call it Kwibohara, it's the 25th anniversary of the end of their civil war.
Right.
And just the reverence of their experience, of their loss and of their tragedy. It's just so like high and deep, and it runs through the government and civil society and citizens. And in Sierra Leone, for me, I just feel like maybe there is this is not anybody else's opinion, so nobody should quote me, but that we sped through, and in a way, in doing that with the TRC and that model, that there's a lot of healing that doesn't happen. There's a lot of discussion, conversation. We just, even on a personal level, I must tell you that I wrote out the war in my own personal story. And it's only recently that I've been starting to reconsider my own memories of the war as a child and what that might have done to me, et cetera, et cetera. And like you, I always say that because so and so did not happen to me, that like I don't have ownership. I can't claim the war as part of my experience because I wasn't raped. I can't claim the war as part of my experience because this didn't happen. Other people had it so much worse. But nobody should have to flee from their home at the age of 11 do you understand what I mean? Like that alone in itself is traumatic. And so yeah, I just really want to hear what you have to say in terms of what the role of the TRC in our collective memory, and just how governments and as a nation, how we've dealt with the war and the memory of the war.
So I must say that the TRC was one of the best post-conflict transitional justice mechanisms that happened in this country within their mandate. I think they collected an impartial historical fact about the Civil War that we all need to know. And the moment they collected that information was very important because many of the actors were still alive and in country. So it was very important for them to do that work immediately after the war. Now, the TRC provided recommendations within everything you have just said and left it to the government and subsequent generation of Sierra Leoneans, including civil society, non-governmental organizations, 3 layers of recommendation to government, to civil society, and to various institutions for us to continue the work that they started. They recognized that they had not completed the job and gave that responsibility to subsequent generation of Sierra Leonean to follow up and implement certain things. But like you said, our subsequent governments have not been truly interested. And that's one of the reasons that I am doing what I'm doing. I can tell you, for instance, there's one recommendation that requires very little, and that is that the government of Sierra Leone declares January 18 as a National Reconciliation Day to bring Sierra Leoneans together to remember the Civil War and to commemorate what they had been through. I have written the government twice. I have been to State House on multiple occasions. On this very small, I have even written the resolution. They have it. All they have to do is for the president to sign that resolution saying we declare this day so and so. Because I don't like people to say, oh, we're not doing this because we don't have this and this and this. We don't know how to do it. So one of the problems was, well, how do you write such a resolution? I wrote it. I give it to them. I've submitted it 3 times to various government institutions, including the Human Rights Commission, which was created to help government carry on the work that the TRC started. But nobody has done anything.
Hi, this is Vicky Remoe from the Make Sierra Leone Famous podcast. I just wanted to say we really, really appreciate all your comments, all your feedbacks, the emails, the DMs, every other way that you get back in touch with us. If you really love this show and you want us to keep making content to make Sierra Leone famous, don't forget to leave us a review. Thank you.
But why do you think that is? Isn't it because if you look at it, right? This is really what my argument is, that once something in Sierra Leone, the ownership of that thing is foreign, that the financing of that thing is foreign. When you take away those foreign actors, local actors don't want to take up responsibility because they no longer see how they can benefit financially. Right? But if tomorrow a donor said, we're willing to finance the creation of a National Memory Day, within 3 days, we will have it in Parliament. And so this is why I'm like, the TRC, yes, I definitely feel like ordinarily, yes, they set the roadmap, right, for peace and reconciliation for years to come, including making recommendations like having more young people and women be included in government, decentralization, which, do you understand? Like, when you look at actually the country that we have today, so much of it is from that TRC, post-TRC rebuilding. How do you build a nation state that's failed before, to make sure that you safeguard it from failure again? But in terms of this part, the part about the memory and the veneration, right, and the regard, we just have there's just no interest. And I think for me, until we have that kind of interest and regard, we cannot gain our dignity, right? Because I think that the biggest loss from the Civil War, which is intergenerational loss, is that the war, we lost our dignity as Sierra Leoneans. Like so many, all of us collectively. And that you cannot regain your dignity if you do not find a way to touch the place that was broken and, pour libation on it and heal it. And heal it collectively, where we all stand together and we say, this thing happened to us, all of us collectively as a nation, not as Northerners and Southerners and Kamajo and RUF and this and Poro and this, not as that, but as a nation that all of us have been collectively broken, traumatized by this, that it's fractured our families, it's disrupted our communities. Like, in every way, it's a breakdown of who we are as a people. That until we can do that collectively, this problem that we have today, which is that we are a state but not a nation, continues, because we don't have dignity. There's no dignity. It's why when you think about, the way the state regards citizens, like, a lot of times things happen, there's just this general neglect. Person make noise, say, it's like saying you want to in a government and deaf, then blind. You're like, but I don't see how people that they suffer. People can go team up on radio, then a TV, then cost. Before now, you go get government person go. And I feel like that's because in the eyes of the government and citizens to citizens, we don't really see ourselves as fully human. Like, we don't have rights. You know what I mean?
That is the point.
We don't have rights. And that's why I think that what you're doing is so important, because what I'm hoping will come from this is that this renewed interest in the way we remember, because we're remembering for healing. And without that, you just like, who say we did so, guys? I'm just like, because, and for me, really, any cinema where we talk, I can talk and say by the end, I'm like, this is the war, because I don't understand how, like, there is just no humanity. You know what I mean?
And in fact, some of the consequences of that war is still affecting our country today. Rape was an instrument of war, and the rampant rape in our society today, one can adequately trace to the normalization of rape during the conflict. That's Absolutely. What they did. They attacked villages and raped women. And some of these people are still alive in our society.
What do you mean some? What do you mean some? They're all they did. People I mean,
national reckoning like Germany has after World War II, we will not succeed in democratization. Absolutely. It will not work because the institutions that were recommended to take certain actions still haven't taken it, and they are still on the path that they were before the Civil War. Let's take, for instance, the Sierra Leone Bar Association. It's one of the institutions that the TRC talked about a lot.
They're still dependent on political boom, bam, boom.
There you go. Unless we stop those things and work as institutions, work for the people, we cannot succeed in what we want to do as a nation. We will continue living the life of improvisation, where this government guy do it if he say for do we dance, and then the other one. We are in a period of national malaise and we need serious healing, and that means we must confront our horrible past. If we do not do it, our future will not be clear.
No, you're absolutely right. What do you think? I mean, people are going to listen to this conversation, and as the historian, as this storyteller, as this, leader in the community around memory and reparations, what do you think that an individual can do? So if somebody listens to this today and they're like, I really think that the way we remember the war should change. I really want to take action so that we don't repeat this again. I really want to build just like a better, more unified Sierra Leone that is healed, right? That is aware of where it's broken and is working towards healing. Where do they start? Like, how does one go on this journey, I guess, with you, with the Center for Memory and Reparations? How can other people who are interested in this work get involved? And what can they do also, just like, what do you recommend, like we all do, to start this process of fixing the our individual and collective trauma and victimization?
Now, I always say, especially those who are educated, the first thing you can do is read the summarized version of the TRC report. I'm not going to condemn everybody to reading the full volumes of that report, but read the summary, because we need to first understand where we went wrong. Mm-hmm. And once you have a clear vision of the country, where it had been, I think you can help define where you as an individual can get involved to fix this country. And nothing is off the hook in that report, from churches to mosques to private institutions to government. So don't say me not to politician, me I know they did. Even churches had a hand in the conflict that we experienced in this country. And as a deacon in your church, there are recommendations in that document for you to take certain actions to make sure that we have a better Sierra Leone. And once you have completed that summarized report, and you have a better understanding of really the errors that happened in this country that led to the Civil War, you have a clear sight of what's happening in the country now, and you will realize that we are standing on a keg. And unless we all act together, we won't have a stable society. And then, of course, you can follow the work that we are doing with the Center for Memory and Reparations, and to listen to some of the stories and what we're doing, and get involved.
Okay. Do you think that it is possible for us? I mean, do we really need the government? Like, okay, I'll tell you first of all, can we not have the day that you have proposed? What can we do as citizens? Let's say next year, we want to hold this place for this day. What can we do? What mass action can we do? Can we plan as citizens that doesn't, I mean, if we started to pagan, Christmas was a pagan holiday. It was the pagans first that started celebrating it, and now the Christians are like, that is ours. Can we as citizens not hold this space, hold this day, revere it, and lead the government where it needs to go? Must we wait for that?
So that's exactly what we're doing. Even last year, we celebrated National Reconciliation Day. And what we want to do is make as many Sierra Leoneans as possible to get involved. We don't have to wait for government. In fact, this month, I am going to start a petition online that all Sierra Leoneans can sign, just to make sure the government understands that this is something that we need. But for the coming year, we also have a plan to celebrate National Reconciliation Day with citizens' involvement. We've started what we call 60 Minutes for Sierra Leone. So on National Reconciliation Day, we are going to ask each Sierra Leonean to take 60 minutes of their day to do something meaningful for their country, a community service. It could be anything. Last year, we had a host of lists like be nice to a nurse, read to children, something you can do, because people think, oh, I must donate, I don't have money. No, you can render small services in your community just for 60 minute marking National Reconciliation Day. Because what we really want to achieve with a day like that is not just to sit home and weep about what we went through, but to realize that changing this country rests with us as individuals. We are the ones who vote these people.
Right.
We deserve the leaders we have because we vote them. There was an issue today where the former president is only going to be interviewed, and the whole of McKinney is now in chaos. These are citizens.
Yeah.
But we will cry about corruption in the country, but we won't allow corruption to be investigated. Now, who do you blame for that, Vicky?
Make Sierra Leone famous. The podcast is mixed and mastered by producer Frankvin Bob McEwen, with support from the creative and talented team over at VRNC Marketing Company in Freetown. And now, make we go back to Make Sierra Leone famous.
Well, not corruption. Citizenship.
No, I do think that, I mean, and again, to tie back into this conversation about memory and the past, I do believe that it is our culture. Accountability is not our culture.
Right.
And you said something earlier about how Sierra Leoneans hate confrontation.
Right.
And we hate it. I don't know I don't know what it is about our culture, our history, our tradition and customs. But as a people, we do not want accountability. We think that accountability is bad. We feel that if someone has done something wrong, if they say they are sorry, you are obligated to forgive. That there are we also believe that there are certain people, especially people who have power, people who have wealth, that they deserve, like, even though their wealth or power might be through us, right? As in, you as a citizen, you vote for somebody, you elect somebody, et cetera, somebody's your leader that you've chosen, that once they get there, we think of them as better than us, that the rules should be different for them, which is why even when we see them while they're in office, doing things that show us that this person is corrupt, right? That we allow it, we don't rise up, we don't raise our voices, because we almost think that these are the sweets of office. Like, if this person is a leader, they deserve to have 10 houses, they deserve to have 30 houses. We know that their salary does not pay for all of this, but somehow there's something within us that says, as long as these people are at the top, we need to uphold this charade of their leadership, of their wealth, whatever. So I really think the issue of corruption is that Sierra Leoneans culturally are anti-accountability. Our culture.
I agree with that to a certain extent. That is true. But I like to say we're just selfish people, because I believe that is not accountability we hate, because we pull up us in this country. I'm going to say Sabi Redemic Mamikos. And that is a form of accountability, but it involves them personally. And in you pull up. So
yeah, but I feel like even I tell you, you don't, even when people steal, right? There's one person I will never forget, because he said something that just fundamentally changed how I think of Sierra Leoneans, was Indolo Trai, former Minister of Tourism, who passed away while he was serving the last government. I think everybody knows Indolo Trai. There was one Independence Day event at the National Stadium where he introduced this idea or concept of immoral begging, how in Sierra Leone, we practice this culture of immoral begging, which he explained as, even when we know people have done something wrong, so you would know that someone has done something wrong, they will go and call you to come and beg for them. You will come and beg for them, prostrate yourself on the floor, knowing full well this person has done something wrong, right? Yeah. And now you expect that person, right, to give in because you've prostrated, you've begged, right? But you know that the person is guilty. You know that what they did is wrong. right? And that's how I really feel about Sierra Leoneans in general, that this is so deeply ingrained and embedded in our culture that it stops us from speaking the truth. It stops us from holding our leaders accountable because we just can't be honest about things that are just wrong.
Yes, and you've just stated our
like,
major problem, dishonesty. I'm often telling people that
like we have a culture of dishonesty. Please, Center for Memory and Reparations, please add Center for Memory, Reparations, and ending dishonesty in our lives forever.
We are very dishonest, even when it comes to beliefs in God.
Of course.
So with our experiences of the conflict, unless we go back and confront the truth, the fact, we will not be able to move forward as a country. We just can't achieve what we want to achieve as a democratic society with a foundation of lies, with a foundation of suffering and victimization. Because we won't be a united people. And that means we embrace the idea of continuing the work of reconciliation that the TRC started, which is what Rwanda is doing. Rwanda had their Rokaka courts and sentenced a few people criminally, and they decided that was not enough. We had to make this part of our existence now, as horrible as it is. Children have to learn about.
Absolutely. I was actually, as you were speaking, when you said earlier that the TRC when you said earlier that the people should read the summarized versions of the TRC. I mean, years ago, of course, I read the full version and the summarized version. And I wondered when you said that, whether or not this was like curriculum in school, like when they're teaching history today.
This is one of the reasons I respect the TRC. There's even a secondary school version that was recommended to be introduced in schools across this country.
But we don't know money not there for pay for that now.
This is the wahala.
Can you please tell me just a little bit about how you were able to get funding for the work you're doing now? Who supports it?
So again,
speaking of donors.
So like we discussed from the beginning, I have always been doing this work as a citizen. And last year, again, on January 18, we were celebrating National Reconciliation Day. And I got a call that said, who is doing this? And I said, well, this is something I'm doing. Under what branch of government? I said,
you're like, you mama.
Under the branch of government called Joseph Ben-Kaifala dynasty. And of course, they explained to me that they often give out funding for a project like these.
And who was this that contacted you?
It's the African Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, which is led by a Sierra Leonean called McMead.
I know McMead. Was he with Amnesty at some point?
Yes, he was with Amnesty.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Guy.
So, of course, knowing what we do, and this was very tricky because often I say I don't want to change what I'm doing just to
get money. Which is what a lot of projects have to do.
As you know, most donors don't want to fund anything that has to do with construction.
Of course.
And I told them clearly what I want to do is mark mass graves, and that involves construction. If you can fund this, it's good with me. If not, I'll continue to seek funding as well. And of course, they were willing and flexible, and they decided to fund us to at least identify and mark 10 of those mass graves within a year, and that is what we are doing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this story with me.
Well, now so for today's edition of Make Sierra Leone Famous with me, your host, Vicky Remoe. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. Ta-ta.